I see a rage killing somebody that lives within 3 hours.
To kill somebody with a knife, it's very personal. You're covered in their blood. You have exclusive pictures of inside the house.
It looked like a mess.
You spoke to someone who was at the party.
They told me that Ethan had words and that it got heated.
The gruesome quadruple murder of 4 university students has really transfixed the nation and left the tiny town of Moscow, Idaho, both frustrated and fearful as hours, days, and now weeks go by with police still yet to name a suspect or even a person of interest. On November 13th, sometime between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m., Ethan, Xana, and best friends Kaylee and Madison were stabbed to death in their house near the campus of the University of Idaho after a night of partying. Law enforcement says the 2 surviving roommates were asleep in their first-floor bedrooms during the attack and didn't wake up until later that morning. Now, at this point, police are not sure if the attack was a target on the house or the students. Kaylee's father believes the killer did target his daughter and her friends coming in through the second-floor sliding glass door. Now, either way, the families are demanding answers. But as of now, this whole thing remains a mystery. Dr. Casey, let me start with you.
Sure.
When you look at this, beyond the horrific nature of this crime, these 4 young people so tragically killed, is there anything that jumps out at you about it?
We have to consider that this is a town that's not had any homicides in 7 years. It's a university town, 26,000 people live there, but half, at least 13,000, are students.
Right.
So when you think about 4 people dying in one night with horrific slashings, okay, the stabbing of that knife shows a frenzy. So whoever went into that house, if it was targeted towards the human, which is what Kaylee's father believes, started with, in his words, the 2 girls, but then took the time to kill another couple. We don't know if the perpetrator went downstairs or was even aware that there were 2 unharmed people downstairs. So the idea that you have 6 people, it doesn't surprise me that the roommate slept through it, because I know how college kids are when they party on a Saturday night. But to go in and get out, take the knife with him, and leave no trace, because we're going to come up on a month very soon with no suspects. What stands out the most is that I would have guessed this was inner circle, somebody who knew these girls. I think Kaylee and Maddie were probably the targets if it was indeed targeted. And I would have thought that they would have a suspect by now, that they would have an arrest by now. And as time goes on, Dr. Phil, I am more and more convinced that this could be a random stranger, something like the Gainesville Ripper that we saw in Florida 30 years ago.
Right.
As time passes, the odds of that being true do increase.
Of this attack, what you see is somebody that I think we're all in agreement, somebody that probably lives, I put it within 3 hours, because if it happened at 3, the sun came up around 7, most likely an attacker would want to be home and would be satiated. This is also a lot about satiation. So the person was probably satiated, exhausted, and didn't want to be out after the sun came up.
This was not a particularly complex house, but it was on 3 levels. And if the entry was on the second level, or was actually the middle level, the ground level, and I think everybody is kind of assuming that that was the entry point.
It does make the most sense.
Yeah, it makes the most sense to come through that slider, which was ground level, so somebody could walk up and come through there. Okay. Now, DailyMail.com has been covering the case since the beginning. And so joining us now is DailyMail.com Senior Reporter and our good friend, Caitlyn Becker, who has brought us exclusive pictures of inside the house. And Caitlyn, you've been all over this, so let's get some details here and start by looking at the bedrooms where these victims were found. It's very likely that they came in the sliding door. And that's the one that you can walk up to, right? You can just walk up on the grass.
So the back of the house is ground floor? is the second floor. There's two possible points of entry there. There's a slider and a window, and there was a cinder block under a window, which were very close, and they're going into the kitchen.
Okay.
Now, Xana and her boyfriend, Ethan, were on the second floor there.
This is the patio ground access where someone could walk up.
Yeah.
And this is a sliding door.
And there's
then
a window near there, too.
And there was a window near there as well. And who was on this floor and in which bedroom?
So that was Xana and Ethan, and they were a couple, and I believe they were bedroom D.
Maddie and Kaylee were on the third floor. They were in which bedroom?
So they were in bedroom E, which was Maddie's bedroom.
Okay, they were over
Kaylee's
here.
bedroom was bedroom F, but Kaylee had moved out because she was graduating in December. So she was just back visiting for the weekend, had brought her dog with her, and her best friend from growing up was her roommate, Maddie. So they were sleeping in the same bed in room E, Maddie's room.
Then the third couple was in the basement on the first floor.
The roommates.
Yeah, the two roommates. And so there were two empty bedrooms in the house.
Okay. The whole point is these guys say they didn't hear anything at all. And if they had been out partying and were zonked out and all, did it seem like that's possible that they could not hear anything?
It's certainly possible that they couldn't have heard anything. And we've also heard from other people who were living in the house in years prior who had rented it before these girls did, saying that he was on the lowest floor, and unless someone was playing a television extremely loud on the second floor, extremely loud on the third floor, they really wouldn't have heard anything. As you can see, the house is laid out kind of funky, so I don't know what the acoustics are like. You also have to figure this is a house with a bunch of roommates in college, so a little noise is probably kind of normal. So maybe you hear walking around, it doesn't wake them up because they're kind of used to it.
This knife that was used is kind of a cliche among young people. This is a Rambo knife.
Right.
And so this is something that you see in video games. It's something you see in movies because it's a very macho looking knife.
It's also in shadow boxes and sold. It's one of the cheaper end knives, so you don't have to be, you know, a lot of these knives are $200 or more for a really top quality knife. This is a cheaper knife.
Yeah.
So somebody that doesn't have a big bank account would probably order this. Would also lead me to believe it's a younger individual. Somebody just doesn't have a lot of money.
A real professional would not use that knife.
So we're issued a K-bar knife. Or I don't know about currently, but when I was in, we were issued that knife. And when everybody got out of training, everybody in my platoon immediately went and bought other kinds of knives because it's a thick knife. It doesn't hold an edge well, and the tip is prone to breaking off.
And there's also a guard in a frenzied attack. That's very likely to injure the one doing the stabbing if it's in a frenzied knife, which is likely to leave DNA from that individual.
Correct. And you know, again, when you're using that on 4 individuals, let's not look at them as people. Let's look at them as the objects that were being bluntly hit with this knife. You're talking about bone, cartilage, things that will dull a knife very quickly. So you would probably see a progression of smaller and smaller wounds, or not as deep, or the penetration just wouldn't be as good, and it would become a more physical attack from the very first start.
Well, the one thing Jonathan and I had spoken about relative to this type of knife, guess what it comes with? It comes with a sheath. And everybody's saying, we don't know, the knife isn't there. I think my question is, did he drop the sheath at the scene? Was that left behind? Do they have that clue to go on?
But in terms of looking at this from forensic standpoint, we do know if 4 people are stabbed in rapid succession, the one that's stabbed first is going to have the most wounds and the deeper wounds.
Right.
And we know that you'll know that that's the person stabbed first because they won't have any of the other 3's DNA on them.
You're absolutely right, Dr. Phil. So there'll be the least amount of transfer DNA from that individual. Just imagine we've got A, B, C, and D. So for the first victim, once they are stabbed, and you know, as Jonathan pointed out, it would be you would have significance there because the individual would still be full of vim and vigor at that point. But from a DNA perspective, as you move to victim B, you're taking DNA from A and then essentially inoculating that individual with A's DNA and so forth and so on until By the time you get to D, there is a high probability that you're going to have this succession all the way along where they will contain DNA, perhaps, of everybody involved in this case.
They think they're maybe clearing some people too quickly here. What do you think about that?
All right, statistically, we're going to look at what we call the inner circle of their friends, people, acquaintances who might have had a vendetta, a beef, a disagreement that could explain what the mayor called a crime of passion. We see this with a lot of exes, ex-boyfriends, people that they've had falling outs with on social media. But what you do is find the one person is targeted. You don't see them continue with everyone else in the house. So that's what is really unusual from a criminological standpoint. When you think about the fact that one person might have been targeted and they decided to kill everyone else in the house and there was no sexual assault, to me that's extremely interesting. The stabbing motion we typically see in forensic psychology is what we call piquerism. It's a substitute for sexual action when you can't sexually perform. So that has raised some theories that it could be an incel, somebody who's an involuntary celibate, who has issues with what Elliot Rodgers once called Stacy's, those beautiful blonde sorority sister types, because they feel like they're unobtainable.
Well, Kaylee had made comments about a stalker before her death.
I've got to tell you, young ladies, I've been teaching college for 35 years. If they've got a stalker, they tell everyone. They tell their friends. They might not tell their family because they don't want daddy to worry, but they're not stupid. They want their friends to walk with them to bars. I think that if the stalker theory were real, we would have a lot more information on that. People would have a specific person in mind, and that would be a person of interest by now.
Yeah, if this was someone that was attracted to one or both of Kaylee and Maddie, I mean, why go to the other couple?
The person that did this was somebody who is satiated by the killing. I think that's the main thing because of the fact that it continued. And I think what we probably would see is an escalated behavior. So this is somebody who I can guarantee you in the community in which they live, there's people who know this individual as odd, somebody who has a violent past, or somebody they've dated or in their family who's shown a propensity for violence and has increased. Because of the way this was carried out, I just don't believe that this is the first time this person is killed.
This is a very intimate way to kill someone. To kill somebody with a knife is very up close, it's very personal, it's time consuming, and you're involved. You're covered in their blood. You smell the blood. You're right there. And that is a barrier that few people cross. And to do it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, this is a dangerous individual. Somebody knows this person. Somebody out there works with this person. Somebody out there is a parent or a brother or a sister to this person. Somebody knows who this is. And everybody has a baseline. And when people do something dramatic in their life, they tend to depart from that baseline. And you need to think about this. If you're listening to this right now, if there's someone you know that's been in or around Moscow, Idaho, and you think, no, but extend your thinking. You truly, truly need to think about that. Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.
Zach Woodshow, appearing for the state of Wisconsin.
Good morning, sir. Please state your name for the record.
I'm here as a third-party intervener